Now, you're probably sick of me talking about this on this channel, but it's coming up again. We're talking about Keir Starmer's broken pledges once more on this channel. That's because a campaign group called Led by Donkeys, who actually have hold the record for the largest independent political campaign fundraising of all time in the UK, they have now also decided that it's bad when Keir Starmer breaks pledges. And so what they've done is they've done their very typical activism. They've done a banner, not a billboard this time, but a banner. Let's have a look and see what they've been up to.
Morning, mate. So look, I'm from LBD Installations. We just wondered, is there somebody we could get down from Labour to sign for the new post? It's Keir Starmer's own words in support of proportional representation.
I'm not signing for anything now.
That's it. They've hung a banner up on Labour HQ talking about a broken pledge, essentially, by Keir Starmer about a promise to bring in proportional representation and on the failures of first past the post as a voting system. Now, a couple of things to say about this. First of all, yes, it is correct to criticise Keir Starmer for this. It's a pledge that he's broken. We want honesty in our politicians, and he's clearly rode back on this, not just in the position that he holds, but in the fact that he explicitly repudiates it now. He says he's not even been sold on the case for it, despite that he was saying that he was going to do it during the leadership election. Yeah, and Blair did pledge to do this too, and then obviously reneged on that when he realised that why on earth would you do that when you have a gigantic captive audience as far as the UK electorate is concerned in first past the post being given a huge majority, which looks like Keir Starmer is going to also get when he inevitably becomes Prime Minister at the next election. It also is worth pointing out that there is history of Led by Donkeys doing good campaign work. I do agree they are mostly very cringe, but they did do a big long video talking about corruption in politics and the bribery that goes on behind the scenes, inverted commas bribery for legal reasons, when they did the potential interviews for high-paying lobbying positions to a bunch of Conservative MPs, which, you know, it does show just how easy it is to get your ideas cemented in the political consensus by having enough money to be able to pay off elected representatives. That was good work. They did a video on why water privatisation failed as well, because clearly it had. We all know water privatisation has failed. That's true. It's just a shame that a large amount of all of this gigantic amount of political funding they got originally was just anti-Brexit billboards. In the run-up to the 2017 election, in fact, they were doing campaigning on Twitter, attacking Jeremy Corbyn for being too Brexity, even though this was like a year after we had a democratic vote and the country voted to leave the European Union, which is obviously very, very frustrating that all of that money was spent on billboards for a thing that they never overturned. And in fact, a lot of the kind of people who agreed with them were the ones who dug their heels in on wanting to overturn it rather than compromise that led us to the hard Brexit that we do have at the moment. It's also galling for them to say water privatisation is bad, and then when it comes to their choice of pledge to criticise Keir Starmer over, now I believe in proportional representation, I think this is a good thing to criticise, but the pledge that they only chose a single pledge, and it wasn't water nationalisation, right? It wasn't stronger trade union rights, it wasn't taxes on the wealthy, things that would help poor, but it was the hobby horse of the Liberals, which is electoral reform. Again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be campaigning for electoral reform. We should be campaigning for electoral reform. It is bad that Keir Starmer has reneged on the promise for electoral reform, but that should not be your main thing. When you already have a video saying water privatisation has failed, and the leader of the opposition who has stood on a platform, a pledge to nationalise our water system, renationalise it, to then say, well, we're not going to criticise him for the thing that the vast majority of the country believes in. We're going to focus on our single issue that we are kind of obsessed with and forget all of the other pledges that he's broken. Like, it's nice to see these people actually critique Keir Starmer for once the Liberals are now not on side of the Labour Party and Keir Starmer and adults being back in the room, grown-up politics, for example. That's something that I'm on board with. I just think that as far as strategy goes, as far as your choice of key issue in this regard, I really think they've missed the mark here. The other thing I want to say about this is that regardless of what you think about Led by Donkeys, you think about their campaign, you think about Keir Starmer, or what you think about the choice of issue that they've chosen to highlight as far as broken pledges are concerned, I'd like to point out something about this. This just looks like a Labour advert. This doesn't look like something that they've done to critique the Labour Party, because unless you're like really clued into politics, you probably haven't followed Keir Starmer's trajectory as far as policy promises are concerned with regards to proportional representation. Most people are not going to see this and think this is a criticism of Keir Starmer for his reneging on this promise. They're going to think, oh, okay, Keir Starmer believes in electoral reform, which I guess might lead to some people being aggrieved when he doesn't do it, but it won't really actually properly sit right with people or actually impact people to understand that what they're criticising here, as well as his failure on policy, is the fact that he is disingenuous, that he is a liar, that he is a promise breaker, because that is indeed the case. This looks you remember the bit in The Simpsons where George Bush Sr. moves next door to the Simpson family, and Barbara and George Bush really clash with Bart and Homer, and so George Bush hangs this massive banner on his house that says "Two bad neighbors" with like crudely drawn pictures of Homer and Bart, and people are like, are you saying that you and Barbara are bad neighbors? This is what they've done. This is what they've tried to criticize Keir Starmer, and it just looks like a Keir Starmer advert. So even by their own metrics, this is not a successful piece of campaigning. You think electoral reform is the most important policy in the UK because first past the post means we have an executive which is essentially dictatorial power? I agree that first past the post is bad and that PR isn't great. Ropes in Sweden. I agree with both of those points, but we don't have time to have 5 years worth of discussion about what happens at the election after the next one. What we don't have time for is dilly-dallying around on procedural things when the economics of this country is on an absolute cliff edge. I mean, it's been on a cliff edge for 13 years, and we need proper economic policy now. I get the campaign for electoral reform. It's good. It is important. I understand fully the position, Comrade Jock, and I do agree. But that can come 4 years down the line when, we're looking at the next election, but potentially when Keir Starmer will have the power to change it, when he obviously won't. We all know here that it will never actually get changed unless there's a coalition government, which is why you shouldn't vote for the Labour Party, among other reasons. But if you're going to push Keir Starmer on a specific policy, a very specific policy, it has to be economic reform for working class people now. We do not have time to wait 5 years for council housing, to wait 5 years for climate action, to wait 5 years for stronger collective bargaining between unions, for better taxation. We cannot wait for the gap between the rich and the poor, for the issue with our housing crisis, for the climate crisis and extra excavation in the North Sea to continue for 5 years until we have the discussion for the next manifesto. This is why I think that this choice of attack line is not relevant right now. And it just shows the level of priority that these liberal types do have, where it is about their political hobby horses and not about the real material harm that a Labour government is going to do, not what harm they'll have for the electoral system we use in 6 years' time, but what the immediate impact of their poor economic policy will be as soon as they get into power. And that's the big issue here. Actually, interesting thing that Owen Jones has pointed out here. All the liberals who spend their lives screaming at him for pointing out that Keir Starmer's broken pledges are going to be calling led by donkeys Tory enablers for attacking Keir Starmer. Well, no, they aren't going to be, because again, their political raison d'etre is kind of constitutional reform, because they are not in the position where root and branch change to economic and tax policy is going to actually affect their lives in a meaningful way, in the way that it will for working class people. And that's what they really care about by their blue team, red team, we must get the Tories out at all costs style political discussion. Because they won't be calling led by donkeys Tory enablers for daring to criticise God King Starmer, because they believe that led by donkeys are on the right team, whereas anyone to the left of Gerhard Schroeder is on the bad team, because we're the hard left Frank Trotskyists with our desire for social democratic economic policy. And yeah, the impact on people's lives of economic policy is more important immediately than PR, even though I think PR is going to be important in 4 years' time. Social Democrat Starmer supporters are now saying that wealth taxes are bad. This is where we are now. Yep, literally where we are now. These people don't know what social democracy is. Like, the German Social Democratic Party retained its commitment to Marxism up until the 1960s. Social democratic parties have historically been Marxist, just had differences of approaches than other Marxist parties. And they are now saying that anything to the left of centre-right, neoliberal, market fundamentalism is hard left crankery. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing. It does help out the channel and the algorithm. And if you click the bell notification icon, it will let you know when I go live and when I upload videos. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my handle is @NoJusticeMTG, and that is Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. If you want to support my channel in a more financial manner, you can do so by becoming a member for just 99p, by super chatting, or by supporting me on Patreon, with the link is in the description of this video, and hopefully I'll catch you on the next segment.